My dear brothers and sisters, listen closely, for what I am about to tell you may shake you, wake you, and stir something deep within your soul. There comes a time in every person's life when they must decide what is worth keeping and what they must never give up, not for comfort, not for popularity, not for love, and certainly not for the approval of this world. We live in an age where people trade their convictions for convenience, their dignity for a few moments of attention, their peace for temporary companionship, and their connection with God for the fleeting applause of man. But I stand before you to proclaim, with all the fire in my heart, there are sacred things in your life you must never sacrifice for anyone, no matter who they are, friend or family, stranger or lover, boss or leader. There are divine treasures within your soul that must remain untouched, unbought, and unwavering. And I ask you today, what are you willing to lose just to keep someone who was never sent by God in the first place? How many of you have lowered your voice when you should have stood firm? How many of you have swallowed your pain to keep the peace with people who were tearing your spirit apart? God did not create you to be trampled. He did not shape your soul for compromise with darkness. You were created with a divine assignment, and if you begin trading that assignment for the empty praise of people, you will soon find yourself lost, adrift in a world that demands everything but gives you nothing in return. You must understand that when God places something inside of you, truth, dignity, values, purpose, that thing becomes sacred, that thing becomes holy, and no person, no pressure, and no persuasion should ever be powerful enough to make you lay it down. You may walk alone, yes. You may be misunderstood. You may be called stubborn, difficult, or even arrogant. But if what you are standing on is truth, if what you are holding is a command from God, then let the world say what it will. You do not move. You do not bend. You do not surrender. Because the moment you sacrifice what is sacred for someone who does not walk with God, you have given them permission to pull you away from your calling. Let me tell you, the enemy does not always come with horns and fire. Sometimes the enemy comes wrapped in charm, wrapped in affection, wrapped in sweet words and false promises. But if that person, no matter how close, no matter how convincing, tries to separate you from the light of God, tries to silence your truth, tries to shrink your identity to fit their agenda, you must walk away. You must walk away with tears in your eyes if you have to. Walk away with your heart breaking if that's what it takes. But never trade what God gave you for the comfort of companionship that pulls you away from Him. There are people in your life who love the version of you that stays silent. They love the version of you that conforms. They love the version of you that plays small so they can feel big. But the moment you start speaking truth, the moment you start setting boundaries, the moment you begin honoring what God placed in your life, they will try to shame you, guilt you, manipulate you, even punish you. And that is when you must decide, do I live for their approval or do I live for the one who created me? Never sacrifice your faith for anyone. When God lifts you from the pit and places your feet upon solid ground, don't go running back to the mud because someone you care about prefers the dirt. Your faith is not a decoration, it is your foundation. When the storms come, it is your faith that keeps you steady. When the trials rage, it is your faith that becomes your anchor. And the moment you begin to dilute that faith to make someone else comfortable, you begin to lose the very thing that holds you together. The world will offer you compromise in exchange for inclusion. It will ask you to water down your convictions so you can sit at their table. But you must remember the table of man is temporary, but the favor of God is eternal. Do not trade your values for validation. If your heart tells you something is wrong, if your spirit cries out in discomfort, do not silence that voice just because everyone else is clapping. Right is still right even if no one is doing it. Wrong is still wrong even if everyone else is cheering it on. Your values are your compass. They are the quiet voice of God guiding your steps in a noisy world. And if you abandon them to fit in, you may gain the world but lose your way, and what a tragedy that would be. Never sacrifice your peace for anyone. Peace is not weakness. Peace is power. Peace is knowing that no matter what is happening around you, your soul is anchored in God. And the moment you begin allowing someone to disturb that peace with chaos, confusion, and emotional manipulation, you are giving them access to something they did not earn. God did not bring you through every fire and storm for you to live in anxiety because someone else cannot handle your calm. Guard your peace like a lion. Protect it like a warrior. Because when your peace is gone, your mind becomes a battlefield and your spirit becomes restless. And no one is worth that. Never sacrifice your purpose for anyone. The calling that God placed upon your life is not up for negotiation. You were not born to be a background character in someone else's story. You were born with a mission, and every breath you take is precious. But how many of you are delaying your calling because you're afraid of disappointing someone else? How many of you are burying your gifts just to keep someone else from feeling insecure? That is not humility. That is disobedience. When you dim your light so others don't feel uncomfortable, you dishonor the one who gave you that light. And I'm here to tell you today, if someone cannot handle the fullness of your purpose, let them go. Let them walk. Let them criticize. But never abandon your assignment for someone who was never designed to understand it. And finally, never sacrifice your self-respect for anyone. You teach the world how to treat you by what you tolerate, and if you allow someone to consistently disregard your boundaries, dismiss your worth, or degrade your spirit, you are telling them that your soul is for sale. God made you in strength. God made you with honor. God made you to stand tall, not to bow in fear. And if someone only stays in your life when you are silent, compliant, and easy to control, that is not love, that is bondage. And you were not created to live in bondage to any man or woman. You were created to walk in dignity, clothed in the respect that God Himself placed upon you. There is a power that comes when you choose obedience to God over affection from people. There is a strength that rises in your soul when you stop living for applause and start living for purpose. Some of you are tired because you've been holding on to people God told you to release. Some of you are hurting because you keep making sacrifices for people who would never bleed for you. And I say this with love: stop giving your sacred to the careless. Stop handing your diamonds to those who only see stones. Stop bleeding for people who wouldn't even bandage your wounds. You deserve more, not because of who you are, but because of who your Creator is. God doesn't make mistakes. God doesn't create junk. And if He saw fit to place value on your life, then no man has the right to devalue what God has honored. You see, we must stop confusing sacrifice with surrender. There are things worth sacrificing for: truth, justice, righteousness. But there are things that must never be touched, never be handed over, never be negotiated. Your identity in God is one of them. Your peace, your calling, your values, your dignity, these are not bargaining chips. These are the essence of your divine design. And when someone demands you lay them down to keep them in your life, they are asking you to commit spiritual suicide. Don't do it. Don't bend to that pressure. Don't bow to that threat. Stand tall in the presence of your Creator and declare, I will not trade what is eternal for what is temporary. You must be willing to be lonely for a season in order to stay loyal to your purpose. You must be willing to disappoint others in order to remain obedient to God. You must be willing to be misunderstood by men in order to be understood by heaven. And let me tell you something. When you refuse to sacrifice what God gave you, when you walk away from the counterfeit in order to hold on to the real, when you let go of what looks good to receive what is good, that is when true peace enters your life. That is when favor flows. That is when clarity comes. Because God will never bless who you're pretending to be. He will only bless who you truly are: honest, unshaken, obedient, and faithful. There's a fire that burns in those who walk with God. a fire that refuses to be put out by rejection, betrayal, or loneliness. That fire is fed by purpose, by truth, and by unwavering commitment to what is holy. So when they ask you to give up what God gave you, when they tell you to quiet your convictions, when they tempt you to exchange your dignity for their affection, light that fire. Let it burn brighter than their pressure. Let it roar louder than their threats. And let your life be a testimony that some things are too sacred to surrender. The world will always have something to say. They will try to shame you, mold you, break you. But the moment you plant your feet in truth and say, I will not sacrifice what is divine within me, that is when heaven begins to fight for you. That is when protection surrounds you. That is when peace overtakes you. And that is when power begins to rise within you, not power from man, but power from God Himself. And I tell you again, if you forget everything else, remember this: anything that draws you away from God is not a blessing, it is a burden in disguise. There are people who will enter your life wearing the face of peace, but carrying the spirit of distraction. They will smile, flatter, promise you everything your heart desires, but slowly, quietly, they will pull you away from your foundation. And by the time you realize it, your soul will be dry, your strength will be gone, and your connection with God will feel distant. That is the silent danger of sacrifice when it is made for the wrong reasons. God never asked you to hand over your values for someone else's comfort. He never asked you to shrink your voice to protect someone else's ego. When you begin to feel the weight of pleasing others more than pleasing your Creator, you must stop and ask, whose voice am I following? You were not made to follow the voice of the crowd. The crowd will cheer you today and crucify you tomorrow. The crowd will praise your silence but fear your truth. The crowd will love you as long as you give them what they want. But the moment you step into the fullness of who God created you to be, they will withdraw, they will gossip, they will accuse. Let them go. If staying loyal to God means walking alone, then walk alone with your head held high, because solitude with God is better than a room full of people without Him. That's where clarity is born. That's where power returns. That's where the soul begins to heal. There is a cost to obedience. There is a cost to standing firm in a world built on shifting sand, but the cost of obedience is far less than the cost of compromise. Compromise may look easy at first, but it will drain you. It will erode your spirit little by little until the voice of God becomes faint and your sense of right becomes blurred. That is why you must guard your heart like a fortress. Not every invitation is divine, and not every opportunity is a blessing, and not every connection is from God. Some are tests, some are distractions, some are traps dressed as treasures. And if you do not have the discernment to see through the surface, you will sacrifice what is eternal for what is temporary. Do not let anyone guilt you into silence when God gave you a voice for a reason. Do not let anyone call you arrogant for honoring your boundaries. They don't know the battles you've fought. They don't know the nights you cried out to God, the days you begged for strength, the moments when your soul was hanging by a thread. And now that God has lifted you, now that He has restored you, you must not apologize for walking in strength. You must not apologize for protecting your peace. You must not apologize for refusing to sacrifice what God has preserved. Some people only love you when you are broken. Some only need you when you are silent. But your value does not decrease when you grow. Your worth does not lessen when you rise. If your healing threatens their comfort, if your boundaries offend their control, if your confidence exposes their manipulation, do not shrink. Do not retreat. Do not dim the fire God has ignited within you. That fire is your guide. That fire is your weapon. That fire is your witness that you are no longer willing to trade your soul for shallow acceptance. God is watching, not just what you say, but what you tolerate. And when you keep sacrificing your values for people who would never bleed for you, you are telling God that their approval means more than His assignment. But there comes a time, oh, and may it be now, when you must draw the line in the sand, when you must rise up and say, enough. I refuse to be a slave to people's opinions. I refuse to dilute my integrity to be loved. I refuse to hand over what God gave me just to belong to those who were never meant to walk with me. And in that moment, heaven will honor you. In that moment, doors will open that no man can shut. In that moment, you will begin to feel a new power stirring in your bones. Not the kind that comes from pride, but the kind that comes from alignment. Alignment with truth, alignment with purpose, alignment with God's will. That kind of power cannot be shaken. That kind of power does not fade when people leave. That kind of power is what carries you through seasons of darkness and makes you emerge unburned. Let me tell you something sacred. God doesn't need you to be perfect. He doesn't need you to be popular. He needs you to be willing. Willing to stand. Willing to be misunderstood. Willing to be rejected. Because in that rejection, God will elevate you. In that loneliness, God will draw near to you. In that discomfort, He will stretch you into someone you never thought you could become. But the transformation can only begin when you stop offering your soul as a sacrifice on the altar of human acceptance. You are not for everyone, and that is a divine strategy. If everyone agreed with you, you'd never need the courage to stand. If everyone supported you, you'd never need the strength to persevere. It is the resistance that refines you. It is the pressure that shapes you. It is the opposition that reveals whether you are anchored in people or anchored in God. And I say this with the fire of truth burning in my bones. Anchor yourself in God and you will never be shaken. You may bend, but you will not break. You may cry, but you will not collapse. You may be bruised, but you will rise stronger than ever before. There is nothing more powerful than a soul at peace with God, a soul that has nothing to prove to man because it walks in the assurance of divine favor, a soul that is no longer addicted to being understood because it understands its value does not decrease in isolation, a soul that no longer performs for applause because it lives for the quiet whisper of God that says, well done. That is what you must protect. That is what you must guard. That is what you must fight for, not with fists, but with unwavering obedience. Do not sell your spirit for short-term approval. Do not abandon your direction to follow someone who does not know where they're going. And do not lower your standards to meet someone in the pit when God is calling you to higher ground. You must believe deep in your heart that anything God has given you, He gave it with purpose. Your peace, your values, your integrity, your identity, they are not random. They are part of your divine design. And once you see them as sacred, you will no longer hand them over to people who only value the surface. And yes, the road may be narrow, the walk may be lonely, but in that loneliness, there is divine presence. In that isolation, there is revelation. In that pain, there is preparation. God does not abandon the soul that honors Him. He does not forget the one who chooses Him over the world. He lifts, He rewards, He vindicates in ways no man ever could. So walk boldly, speak truthfully, guard fiercely, and above all, stay loyal to what God placed within you. That is the real test, not how many people like you, not how many doors open, but how many sacred things you refused to sacrifice when the pressure came. Because in the end, when all is said and done, it will not be the applause of people that saves you. It will be the favor of God that carries you, and those who walk in the favor of God, those who stand unshaken when the storms roar, those who say no when others bow, those who hold tightly to truth while the world runs wild with lies, those are the souls who will rise above. Not because they were stronger, but because they were anchored in truth, anchored in principle, anchored in the one who never fails. Let your soul be that anchor. Let your heart be that temple. Let your life be that witness. And never again sacrifice what God made sacred for anyone. And now, as the weight of truth settles deeper into your spirit, understand this: Your loyalty to God will always be tested by your relationships with people. It is in the quiet moments, when no one is watching, when no praise is offered, when standing firm costs you everything, that your devotion is truly revealed. God does not test your strength when the sun is shining. He tests it when the storm is howling, when the voices around you are loud and demanding, when you're torn between pleasing man and honoring your Creator. That is when your soul is brought into the courtroom of eternity and your decision echoes beyond time. You see, many claim to believe in God, but only a few are willing to live like they believe. It's easy to carry the name, but far more difficult to carry the responsibility. Because living for God means denying the comfort of compromise. It means confronting your fears. It means cutting off relationships that threaten your values. It means being misunderstood by the very people you once prayed for. And yet, through it all, it means peace. Because nothing brings peace like knowing you are walking in obedience, even if it costs you everything the world calls precious. Let me tell you, when you truly give your heart to God, you will become uncomfortable with things that once entertained you. You will begin to see clearly what is distraction, what is deception, and what is divine. You'll no longer laugh at what offends your soul. You'll no longer tolerate what unsettles your spirit. You'll stop looking for love in places that dishonor your essence. Because your standards will no longer be shaped by people, they'll be shaped by purpose. And purpose does not bend to trends, to manipulation, or to the emotional instability of others. You were not created to bow to opinions. You were not formed in your mother's womb to live in fear of rejection. You were not breathed into by the command of God just to waste your years dancing for the approval of people who can't even see the worth within you. Wake up, beloved. Wake up and rise into the truth of who you are. Your life is not a stage for shallow acceptance. Your life is a battlefield for divine purpose. And if you're not willing to fight for what God has entrusted to you, someone else will come along and rob you of it, subtly, silently, with a smile. Let no one convince you that self-betrayal is love. Love does not ask you to destroy yourself. Love does not demand silence when truth must be spoken. Love does not require the abandonment of faith for the sake of peace. True peace does not come from pleasing everyone. True peace flows from knowing you please the one who holds your destiny in his hands. And that peace, it surpasses understanding. It will guard your heart. It will protect your mind. It will carry you through the rejection, the mockery, the confusion, and it will leave you standing tall when everything else has fallen. There will be moments when your spirit is weary, moments when standing in truth feels like walking through fire. But listen, fire doesn't destroy the soul rooted in God. It purifies it, it removes the dust. It burns away the shallow and reveals the sacred. And some of you are in that fire right now. You're being called to make decisions that frighten you. To say no to people you once feared losing. To separate from those who no longer respect the presence of God in your life. And though your heart aches, your spirit knows, it is time. Time to stop living small. Time to stop selling your peace. Time to stop offering your sacred things to people who walk with careless hands. When God begins to elevate you, you must understand, He doesn't elevate what you pretend to be. He elevates truth. He blesses authenticity. And if He is calling you to higher places, you cannot carry dead weight with you. You cannot bring along every voice that once comforted you. Some of those voices were for a season, not a lifetime. Some of those connections were meant to teach you, not to travel with you. And the sooner you accept this, the quicker your spirit will find clarity. Clarity is a gift from God, and it comes when you release what no longer aligns with your purpose. That confusion in your spirit, that restlessness you feel, is not punishment. It's God trying to separate you from what's hindering your growth. He's trying to open your eyes to what you've been tolerating for too long. He's calling you back to the sacred, back to your original design, back to the path where your soul can breathe again. But that return, oh, that return requires courage. Courage to walk away. Courage to say no. Courage to reclaim the sacred without apology. And I say to you now, reclaim it. Reclaim your faith. Reclaim your voice. Reclaim your time, your focus, your dignity. Reclaim your identity that was once diluted to keep others comfortable. You don't owe anyone your destruction in exchange for their approval. You owe God your obedience. And when obedience becomes your lifestyle, not just your words, you will feel a strength rise in you that no storm can crush. Some of you have been walking around exhausted, not from physical labor, but from emotional compromise. You're tired because you keep trying to be what others expect, and in the process, you've lost touch with who God made you to be. Today, let that be enough. Lay it down. Release the mask. Stop sacrificing your truth. The cost is too high, and the reward is too empty. What God has for you cannot be accessed through manipulation or self-betrayal. It can only be accessed through truth, through alignment, through unshakable devotion. And the beautiful thing is, once you choose truth, everything around you begins to shift. The right people begin to appear. The wrong people begin to leave. The doors that once refused to open swing wide. And the places you feared entering become the very places where God displays His power through you. That's what happens when you refuse to sacrifice what God made holy. You become immovable. You become unbreakable. You become a vessel not just of survival, but of victory. And let me speak this truth with urgency. One of the greatest dangers in this life is not losing people. It is losing yourself while trying to keep people who were never aligned with your divine path. Some of you have twisted yourselves into shapes God never intended, trying to please, trying to be accepted, trying to keep peace with those who never saw your worth to begin with. You've silenced your convictions, stepped over your boundaries, and carried burdens that don't belong to you, all because you were afraid of being alone. But what if I told you that being alone in obedience is far safer than being surrounded in compromise? When God calls you to walk a higher road, not everyone can come with you. You cannot soar with eagles while entertaining crows. You cannot ascend while clinging to what is beneath your calling. And I say this with love, but also with holy fire. It is time to let go of what weakens you. You cannot fulfill your purpose while carrying what God has told you to release. You cannot reach destiny if you keep feeding dysfunction. Some things must fall away, and you must be willing to let them. Do not mourn what God is removing. Do not cry over connections He is severing. If God is allowing distance, if He is exposing hearts, if He is shaking foundations, it is because He is preparing you for something greater. But you cannot receive what is next if your hands are still clinging to what has expired. You cannot enter the new season if your soul is anchored in old pain. And I speak this from a place of compassion, because I know what it feels like to want to hold on. But growth requires separation. Purpose requires pruning, and spiritual maturity requires knowing when to walk away. This is not cruelty, it is divine discipline. And divine discipline is a gift. It is God's way of realigning your life with His truth. Because the most dangerous thing you can do is succeed at being someone He never called you to be. The most heartbreaking failure is not when doors close. It is when your soul becomes so numb from compromise that you no longer recognize the voice of God calling you back. Don't let it get to that place. Hear the warning now. Hear the conviction in your heart. It is not just discomfort. It is the voice of God gently, yet firmly, guiding you out of a life that drains you into the life that was designed for you. When God gives you clarity, act. Don't delay. Don't rationalize disobedience just because your emotions are involved. Your emotions can lie to you. People can deceive you. But God speaks truth, always. And His truth is not meant to harm you, but to set you free. Free from guilt. Free from bondage. Free from cycles that keep you spiritually exhausted. God's truth does not shame, it strengthens. It does not confuse, it brings peace. And when you align with it, you walk in power, because obedience is power. Not the kind of power that dominates others, but the kind that makes you unshakable in a storm. You see, the world is loud, constantly screaming for your attention, constantly pressuring you to conform. But God is not in the noise. He speaks in the stillness, in the quiet resolve of a surrendered heart, in the sacred moments when you choose righteousness over popularity, in those moments when you are mocked for standing alone, in those moments when you are criticized for not participating in the ways of the crowd. That is where God meets you. That is where He whispers strength into your bones. That is where He confirms that your path, though narrow, is blessed. Do not look for applause. Look for alignment. Do not seek to be impressive. Seek to be faithful, because being faithful to God in secret is greater than being impressive to the world in public. The world will change its mind about you 1,000 times, but God sees your essence. God sees your sacrifice. God sees your quiet endurance, and He will reward it, not always in the ways you expect, but always in ways that are eternal. There is a sacredness to obedience that cannot be explained to those who've never tasted the peace of walking in truth. That peace, it doesn't come from circumstances. It doesn't come from everything going your way. It comes from knowing deep in your soul that you are where you're supposed to be, doing what you were created to do, saying what you were meant to say, standing where you were meant to stand. And once you've tasted that kind of peace, you'll never again trade it for shallow relationships or hollow praise. Some of you are being called to stand taller, to speak louder, to believe deeper, to draw the line that should have been drawn long ago. And I say to you, this is your moment, not tomorrow, not when you feel stronger, not when others approve. Now, let today be the day you reclaim your strength. Let today be the day you stop sacrificing your purpose for people who don't carry the fear of God in their hearts. Let today be the day you walk away from manipulation, from emotional entanglements, from one-sided loyalty. You are not weak for letting go. You are wise. You are not cruel for protecting your peace. You are courageous, and you are not selfish for choosing what God has confirmed in your spirit. You are aligned. And in this alignment, blessings will come, not always in riches, not always in recognition, but in deeper discernment, in sharper clarity, in unshakable resilience. God will pour into you what no man can steal, and what He gives you in private, no public trial can take away. This is the reward of those who choose God above all else. The world may not see it, but heaven records it. Every time you say no to what is convenient and yes to what is righteous, heaven rejoices. The path of obedience is not glamorous, but it is glorious. Not in the eyes of man, but in the sight of God. And if your heart beats for that approval, if your soul longs to hear the whisper of divine satisfaction, then stand your ground, no matter who walks away, no matter who misunderstands, no matter what it costs. The reward will outweigh the pain. The peace will drown out the sorrow. The presence of God will fill the space others once occupied. And so I call to your spirit with boldness, rise. Rise above the noise. Rise above the pressure. Rise above the manipulation. Rise into the version of yourself that God intended before the world ever tried to reshape you. You are not here to impress. You are here to impact. You are not here to blend in. You are here to be set apart. And the cost of that separation is worth every tear, every silent night, every lonely step. Because when you walk with God, you walk in power. And when you walk in power, no force on earth can bring you down. This is your time, your awakening, your call to divine courage. Honor it, protect it, and never again, under any circumstance, sacrifice what God has declared sacred within you for anyone. And hear this with your whole soul. When you choose to hold on to what God gave you, even when it costs you friends, opportunities, status, or comfort, you are not losing. You are being refined. You are being separated for greatness. You are walking the narrow path, the path where the few go, but the faithful thrive, because not everyone is willing to protect what God calls sacred. Not everyone has the strength to say no when the world is screaming wise. But you, beloved, are being called higher. And with that call comes a fire that burns away every false attachment, a fire that tests your motives, a fire that demands you be fully aligned, not halfway committed. Too many today are living with divided hearts, trying to please God with one hand and hold on to the world with the other, trying to walk in purpose while entertaining distractions. But you cannot walk forward while looking backward. You cannot rise while you are still clinging to what pulls you down. God is not interested in partial devotion. He is not asking for fragments of your attention. He is a God of truth, and He calls you to walk in wholeness, uncompromised, unwavering, and unafraid. If you knew the value of what's inside you, you would never again offer it to those who only take and never give. You would never again apologize for protecting your soul, your spirit, your purpose. What God has placed within you is not for sale. It is not for negotiation. It is not for public opinion. It is divine. And the moment you stop handing over your sacred peace in exchange for temporary approval, everything in your life begins to shift. You begin to see clearly. You begin to hear clearly. You begin to move in a strength that this world cannot manufacture. Some of you are carrying guilt right now. Guilt for setting boundaries. Guilt for saying no. Guilt for walking away from relationships that used to feel safe but became toxic to your spirit. Let me tell you, that guilt is not from God. That guilt is a lie meant to make you second guess your obedience. But God is not the author of confusion. He is the author of order. And anything that steals your clarity, your joy, your connection with Him is not from Him. And if it's not from Him, it must not remain. You must become fiercely protective of what God is doing in you. You must guard it like a soldier, because spiritual growth is fragile in its early stages. It can be crushed by the wrong voices, stifled by unhealthy environments, suffocated by misplaced loyalty. You cannot afford to keep exposing your healing to those who wounded you. You cannot afford to keep explaining your boundaries to those who never respected you. Your obedience is not up for debate. When God tells you to move, you move. When He tells you to let go, you let go. When He tells you to speak, you speak. Because in obedience there is covering. In obedience there is blessing. In obedience there is life. And don't be surprised when your obedience offends others. People who benefit from your silence will always be threatened by your voice. People who are comfortable with the old version of you will resent the new one that walks in clarity and strength. But do not shrink. Do not go back to who you were just to make others feel safe. Growth will always be uncomfortable for those who refuse to grow with you. But your loyalty is not to their comfort. It is to God's calling. If your peace is disturbed every time you're around someone, that is not a coincidence. It's a signal. If your spirit feels heavy, if your mind becomes clouded, if your values begin to shift in their presence, God is trying to show you something. He's revealing what you could not see in the beginning. He's protecting you from being slowly pulled into darkness under the disguise of closeness. Not every good-hearted person is good for your purpose. Not every shared history should become a shared future. And if you continue to invest in what God is clearly separating you from, don't be surprised when you feel spiritually bankrupt. This is the hour to wake up, to rise, to become sharp in your discernment and bold in your decisions. You cannot walk in divine purpose while entangled in emotional confusion. You cannot pour from an empty spirit, and you certainly cannot carry the weight of your calling while dragging people who were never meant to carry it with you. There comes a time when you must release to rise, and that time is now. Let God be the center again. Let Him be the voice that guides you. Let His truth drown out the noise of opinions, the guilt of others' expectations, and the fear of losing people. If they are meant to be in your life, they will align. If not, they will fall away. And when they fall, do not chase them. Honor what God is doing. Trust the process. Because every time you choose obedience over emotion, heaven rejoices. Every time you choose peace over pressure, you honor your soul. And every time you choose God over compromise, you build a life that cannot be shaken. So I urge you with everything inside me, do not let the world define what only God can design. Your worth is not in your associations. Your value is not in your relationships. Your future is not in their hands. God holds it all. And He is not asking you to have all the answers. He is asking you to trust Him enough to walk away from what He didn't give you. He is asking you to believe that what He has prepared is greater than anything you are afraid to lose. You are not too broken. You are not too late. You are not too far gone. You are exactly where God can use you if you stop sacrificing your spirit on the altar of human approval. Let the fear fall. Let the guilt break. Let the chains drop. And walk forward, eyes open, heart surrendered, spirit blazing with purpose. This is your moment, not to please the world, but to walk with God and never look back. So now I speak to the depths of your soul. Stand. Stand like one who knows they were created by the hand of God for more than compromise. Stand like one who has tasted the peace that comes from truth and refuses to trade it for momentary pleasure. Stand with conviction, not because the path is easy, but because the one who called you is faithful. You may have been misunderstood, rejected, mocked, or overlooked, but none of that defines you. What defines you is your obedience to the voice of God, your refusal to bow to what is beneath your purpose, and your unshakable decision to guard what is sacred. Let this be the day you draw the line. The day you say no more. No more shrinking to be accepted. No more sacrificing your peace to keep the wrong people. No more laying your purpose on the altar of guilt. From this day forward, you walk with clarity. You walk with fire. You walk with God. And when you walk with God, even if the whole world turns against you, you will still rise. You will still thrive. You will still fulfill everything He has written over your life. So protect your faith, guard your dignity, honor your boundaries, preserve your peace, and above all, never again sacrifice what God has declared sacred for anyone. For what God has given, no man can take away, and what God has destined, no voice on earth can cancel. Walk boldly in that truth, and let your life be a living declaration that your loyalty belongs to God and to God alone.